Hi, everybody. Um, so this is a really interesting assignment because what we're doing is we're taking color and looking at how color can create depth. We're also looking at how shape and like diminishing size and overlapping also can help with creating depth. But because this is a color theory class, of course, we really want to pay attention to how color is actually doing that. And so this has, I think, a lot of real world applications for designers. If you can imagine in, let's say, just graphic design, if you want something to stand out in a design, you'd want it to kind of appear, closer to us, like to really kind of pop forward to us. And if you want something to recede, like a background, something that's really not so important, then, you'd use color in a way that would let it fall backwards so it wouldn't be a focal point. So it's a really great way of sort of attracting attention. Maybe text could be in a more sort of intense, like forward kind of color compared to the background or whatever you're doing with your other kinds of graphics. Same with really any kind of design, photography, interior design, game design. Color can really play a part in sort of directing the attention of your viewer. So that's one of the things you can think about with this assignment. Okay, so we're just going to, I think, jump right in and look at people's work and see if there's anything we can do to really, create that very strong sense of depth in the design. Devin, so let's see. Yes, I like your design. I think it's working quite well with the idea of overlapping, a lot of overlapping shapes and also diminishing size, where you're going from big to a little less big, a little smaller and smaller. That's really good. And so for your colors, so you've got analogous here and warm to cool. So you posted late for the previous assignment, and you'll notice in that feedback that I've can make some suggestions here and I can elaborate a little bit more on them. You want to make sure that look, so this is analogous, it's kind of warm to cool. And so what I would do here is make this side a little darker so that you go from light to darker. That will really improve the sense of depth in here because warm colors are going to come forward, cool colors recede. But so that's working, so that's a great choice here for what you picked. But because everything in here is quite saturated and this almost the same value, everything's really coming forward, like so in this assignment we've got like three, you could say three rules about color. First of all, warm color will come forward and cool colors will recede. We also have saturated colors come forward and desaturated colors recede, right? And then areas of high contrast will come forward and areas of low contrast will recede. So sometimes you can actually kind of work at opposite purposes, like and sort of create a sense of, like in your case you've got warm to cool, which is great, cool is in your background, but you also have a lot of saturation here, so it's all kind of tending towards to come forward to us. So again, you could darken this side. You could also desaturate it, like go to a really nice tone in here. That will also do the same kind of effect. So that's what I would do in here. In this one here, you've also, I think, chosen, according to the rules, the correct choice here is that the warmer colors advance and the cooler colors recede, but you're having the same issue here, which is that this is kind of in a way counteracting it. Like you've got a lighter, more saturated color here. So I would do the same thing here. Make this darker, make it desaturated, then it's going to fall backwards really nicely. Okay, so that's what I do on your design here to really get the colors working for you. Okay, Brienne. Okay, again, just make sure to submit a JPEG. You've got a GIF here. That should be really easy to change. And that way, for presentation, you'll always lose a few points if you submit it in the wrong file format. So submitting it in the correct one will just give you that little bit of boost to your grade, which everybody, I think, really can appreciate. Um, okay, yes, so this, I think in both of yours, you have a really good understanding of how the color theory works, where you've got the lighter, kind of um, more saturated color here, and then moving to the cooler color in the background. Let me just double check here. And let's see, in this bottom one, You're also working with the scale, which is good. I might keep going a little further in your scale, like go a little further down, maybe even put one of these two in your background. So you get really nice and dark. Um, so you've got diminishing size, which is great. You want to just add overlapping. So you could, in some areas, like make sure you've got your large areas, like your large circles on the top, and then go backwards, so you're stacking it. Um, like we looked at with the previous design, if that makes sense. Um, and yeah, the only other thing I would do in here too is it looks like all of your shapes are kind of like, coming right to the edge of the design. And I think it's always nice that you kind of pull things off the edge a little bit more, maybe even go a little larger on this end. I'm going to attach a PDF that goes through some of and anybody wants to take a look at it, I'll post it to um, Brienne's post, but it has some interesting, just very basic design tips, and one of them is on cropping, and there's a few others in there as well. But okay, that's what I'd like you to work on. Kristen, yeah, I know those circles, really, so many circles. Yeah, okay, so let's see, analogous, yes, and then warm to cool, yes. I think you've done a really nice job here at choosing what colors to place where so that this area in here is really starting to come forward, which is great. And it looks like you've worked with overlapping, which is great. So the only thing I would add in here is work with diminishing size. And what does that mean? It means that whatever's coming forward, in this case, it's all the colors that, the largest circle should be this circle of this color. And then you go and you diminish the size as you go backwards. So that's the only other thing you need to do here. Yeah. Uh, Okay, yeah, nice job. Okay, Vanessa, yeah, I love the idea of kind of grouping your circles. That's always a really good way to create a design for these types of classes, or really anywhere, is the idea of like taking, kind of creating what I call a motif, where you create sort of like, you take some shapes, you group them together, and then you repeat them throughout a design. So you kind of create one single module, and then just by copying and pasting it in different places, you automatically get a really kind of quick and interesting design. Okay, so you've got your analogous. Yes, so this is the color that's coming forward right here. And then in this case, well, let's actually talk about this one first. So this is coming forward. So you really want um, this color to be stacked on top. And ideally, it would be good if it was the largest size so that you go backwards with it. So right here, here's one of the examples. Can you see this? So this is the largest, and then as we go through the scale, we get smaller and smaller and smaller until this one becomes the background. And the same thing here, this is going to be what's in the color that's coming forward the most, and it's in the biggest circle, and then we go backwards. So you kind of want to sort of play with that in your design. Not saying that this isn't a great way to create a design, but for the purposes of this exercise, we really want to try to make that happen. So maybe, yeah, maybe keep experimenting with the design a little bit more to, again, to get this, you want this one to be your largest circle and on the top, and then you recede backwards. Okay, for this one, um, so for this particular scale, what I would suggest doing with this one is having this blue color a little darker, maybe even a lot darker, so that your warm color really comes forward, because right now you've got kind of like this is coming forward and this is coming forward, and you want to kind of be more definitive about it. And so that's why it's always good to just sort of darken the cool color, because that will give you a more, and you could darken it and also desaturate it a little bit. Okay, and then what you would do is, have your warm color in the foreground. Well, I mean, you could reverse it. It's just going to be, so the rules of color theory is that warm colors advance and saturated colors advance. So it's good to have your warm color saturated and your cool color, darker and desaturated, if that makes sense. A bit more like this, if you imagine this is the warm color. That will get you the strongest sense of depth in your design. So you've got a little bit of work to do with this one to just kind of make sure that you have your design really supporting the color and vice versa. So let me know if you have any questions, but again, just kind of keep playing with it so that your largest circle is going to be the color that advances the most. Hey, Minette. Yeah, you've got a good start here. Let's see, analogous and warm to cool. So I would keep working a little bit more on your scales. I recommended in the previous assignment that you take a look at the tutorials in the instructions for the previous assignment on creating your scales, whether it's Photoshop or Illustrator, just to get a little bit of a more of an even scale. For analogous, I would say it's a little hard to tell which one of these is coming forward. I think maybe this one because it's most saturated. So that might be your largest circle. And then for this one, warm to cool, let's actually look at this in Photoshop. So warm to cool. So I might make this a little bit more strongly warm to cool. So for example, this is warm, this is cool. Maybe go a little cooler. Like go down to here a little bit more because right now you're only about like one swatch away, like one hue, like even a half, maybe even just a half hue. So if you make this a stronger change, you will be able to get more depth in your design. Okay. And the other thing is you want both of your designs the same and you want to work a little bit more with overlapping and diminishing sizes. So take a look at the videos again. They're really the best way to really understand the assignments, and just keep experimenting and make sure you have both of your designs the same so that you can just, the only thing that's going to change here is the color so you can really see how color affects your design. Okay, Sebastian. Yeah, I think you've done a nice job here at understanding the color theory where you've got your lightest, kind of brightest color in the foreground and you're moving towards the background. And also you're seeing most of the contrast here as well. So that's working well. In this one, you've got your warm color in the foreground and you're receding to your kind of darker, cooler color. And that's also works really well. And you're working with diminishing size and overlapping. So that looks good. So I would just say I think you've met all the requirements, and I would say maybe experiment with your design just a little bit more. Like maybe there's a little bit more you could do with, you know, these shapes or this space. You know, just kind of experiment. Maybe sometimes, you know, you could maybe just take this line here and maybe repeat it here. So you get like maybe you'd have 3 of these interesting transitions just to maybe they could be smaller off to the side just to kind of make it a little more, you know, interesting and just another, you know, take it to another level. But I think all the concepts look right on track. Okay, Robert, yes, I think you've also done a nice job here at identifying whatever color you know was the is advancing the most in your design. So for analogous for this one, I may have I apologize if I missed this in my in the previous assignment, but it looks to me like this is still kind of operating a bit more like a monochrome. It looks like a monochrome and it does have a shift in hue, but I would go a little further here. So we're in green, so I might go all the way into the yellows. I think you did go into the yellows if I remember that correctly in your swatches. For some reason it's just not going that far. So I might go all the way, you know, into the yellows to really make it appear like an analogous. In this one, I think this looks good. So with both of these, I might consider putting the darkest color here in your background potentially, because that will make it really fall backwards. Same with this one. You know, so go right from the beginning here of the largest circle that's on top and then go backwards till you get to the darkest color in the background. You'll notice that that creates the most intense depth. You've got overlapping and diminishing size, which is great. I could see experimenting with this design just a little bit more, maybe adding, you know, some other elements to it in terms of circles, like just like I mentioned to the previous student, like maybe adding like a few of these, like, you know, kind of playing with them. Maybe you'd get like a few strands of these, maybe pulling them off the edge of the page, you know, so you have some cropping, just kind of experimenting, you know, just a wee bit more. But I think you're on the right track here. Hi, Robert. Yeah, this is a really cool design. I love the way you kind of created these circles and these patterns in your design. Um, so in the first one, analogous, I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you in the previous assignment, but what you want to do with this one is increase the change in contrast in your design with value and or saturation, or in this scale, I should say. So the easiest way to do this would be to take this color and make it darker, because this is the cooler color. So you'd go from a nice, warm, saturated color to a darker, cooler color. And that would create a lot of depth in your design. And then what you would do is, because warm colors advance, you would go back to this cool color. So this would be in the background, this particular color here. Again, if you make it a little darker, you'll get a lot more depth. And then the background will really fall away. So that would be really good. For this one here, this is your warm to cool. So this is actually a cool to cool. Again, I don't know if I mentioned that to you, but this is a cool color and this is a cool color. So you want to go from warm to cool. So warm colors are orange, yellow, and red. So you would start with that, and then you'd identify whatever color is coming forward, and then you'd go backwards so that your color that recedes the most, it's typically often a cool color, but not always, or a darker colors, or a desaturated color, that would go into your background. Okay, so you just want to rework this a little bit. Take off the outlines in your shapes. That will really create more depth, as we talked about back in week 1. Don't add any outlines at all. Just have all the shapes kind of on their own, and you'll see that the depth really increase. Okay, so you've got a little bit of work here, but I think I think you can build on your design and get a really great result. Okay, ISIS, let's see here. So analogous and warm to cool. Okay, yeah, I actually think you're understanding here. So this to me is, yes, the color that's coming forward, and you have that as your largest circle, which is what you want to do, and then you're going backwards, which is great. And the same with this one, you're going backwards with the color that's coming forward the most, which is this one, to your darker, cooler color. So yeah, I think the only thing you want to do here, you've got diminishing size, you want to now just add some overlapping here. And so a way to do that is just to have them stacked. So like, for example, this is your next biggest circle, so it could go maybe underneath this circle, or you could stack all of these underneath, like, so this would go under this would go under this under this, and so forth, and the same with this. So you could kind of just you could even just maybe keep this on its own and then just stack these. Just experiment with that, but I think you're on the right track here, and that's the only thing you need to add here, is that sense of overlapping. Hi Delta. Yes, I actually think that being limited in this way is really one of the best ways to create, to get your, to be more creative. I remember, after I had been in school for quite a while, I think this was graduate school in design or art, I think. Um, that was one of the assignments I got. It was a very limiting assignment. And when I first got it, I thought, hey, I've been in school for a while now. I've done this already. But it was interesting because it was really one of the most useful assignments I'd ever had, to have to be very limited in the medium I used, or I don't remember all of the details. So I think this is a great assignment, even though it's really frustrating. You can really kind of advance your skills quite a lot. So I'm glad you appreciated it. Okay, so I do like your design. I think it's really a lovely design in terms of the shapes and the way you place them. You just want to work a little bit more here on and I also think you've actually put in the background, you also have the best color here in the background, which is great. So I might just work a little bit more on stacking your shapes, so that, for example, this is your lightest shape, the one that's coming forward. I would make sure that this goes on top, and same with this goes on top. Sort of kind of like you create more of a sense of like how the diminishing size works in relation to, again, to go back to that example. Now this is very different from your design, but if there's any way you can kind of work it in so that you go from the color that's coming forward and move backwards in terms of size and stacking. You may not get quite the same amount of freedom in your composition of where to place things, but you will end up with the maximum amount of depth. So that's what I'd work on just a little bit more on your design, is just making it all very logical in terms of the, this being the shape that's on top, that's the biggest size, and then going backwards in your design. Okay, I think that's it, everybody. Let me know if you have any questions, but otherwise I look forward to seeing your revisions on Wednesday.